Hi, my name is Tom Taylor. I'm a student at Ravensbourne University, London, on my first year of digital film production. Today I'm going to be talking about one of my projects that's happening right now in the Film Language and Technology module, where my task was to make 4 short films in the space of a term. I'm going to be talking about how each film was produced through research, particular language elements, use of technology and the craft, as well as my particular role on each production. So let's just get to it. My first production was unexpected. The brief consisted of us having to explore our visual language, had to be a maximum of 2 minutes, and characters and music were completely up to us. The crew was me, Miles, Leon and Liam, with roles as follows. The story of the film follows a man being watched closely from a distance. As the film continues to build tension, we see the creepy character walk towards the main character, as well as another man coming from a different direction to give the sense of a mugging. As the scene gets more and more intense, we then release the tension by having both men meet in the middle for a handshake. In pre-production, we wanted to all work with Miles to storyboard the context of the film, as we felt it was very necessary for us to all have an understanding of the film before we went into production. Me, Leon and Liam also confirmed equipment, location and health and safety, as these were massive factors to the film. Following that, we then moved on to production on the 19th of October so we could begin to get the film off and running. I've got to say, going into production we all felt as prepared as we could, considering Miles had a strong plan for the story and we all backed it. This however changed drastically from the moment we started filming, when we realised managing the Blackmagic Ursa was going to be way harder than we thought, without any equipment such as rigs, stabilisers and tripods. We then got rid of the Blackmagic and used the Sony a6300, which is a much lighter camera and easier to handle considering the equipment that we had. Location was a massive factor on the day of production, not only to the way we shot it but also to the weather. We didn't want the weather changing too much, and as we were directly shooting into the sun, it sometimes messed with our continuity. We all had a very good understanding while we were shooting the film how it would look in the editing process, so we wanted to keep movement within our shots and jarring angles to create this sudden rush of tension in the scene. So always having movement was key to us. After production, we went into post-production. We all had experience in editing before, however, as I was an assistant editor, I wanted to further my research by reading books such as Filmmaking for Dummies, chapter Editing Your Film Frame by Frame. This book really did further my research during the post-production process, as it gave me a new insight of how to edit a film. One film from the start that really inspired me as I was editing this, as well as in the pre-production process that I had mentioned to Miles, was Michael Evans's Smiling Man. The film is very similar to ours in the way it builds up tension, switching from character to character and the general feeling of unknown, as well as a slow build up to a sudden climax at the end. Due to my lack of understanding at the time about Blackmagic cinema cameras, I could have done some research on how to work an Ursa properly and what equipment was needed. I do feel the story worked as a whole due to the range of shots that we had, as well as putting it all together in the editing process to make it flow as one natural story. Next time I feel we would book out the more necessary equipment to take on any camera that we have, but overall I feel the project was really fun to make and turned out good for the audience. My second production was called The Promise. The skill for this one was mise-en-scène. The duration had to be 3 minutes and the characters and music again were completely up to us. The synopsis of the film is based around a homeless man who spots a fellow person in his shoes trying to rebuild his life by selling newspapers. As the story goes on, Miles' character becomes jealous and starts to lose faith that he'll ever rebuild his life again. As the other man walks off, it turns out that Miles' character was just having a reminiscence of what his life could be if he started to rebuild it. For pre-production for The Promise, we felt we had really good time to knuckle down on a decent story. We started making the script for the 3-minute film, as well as having bold location ideas to relate back to the mise-en-scène. Going for a large-scale idea in the time we had was a risk, but we really felt we could pull it off. We gave ourselves 2 days to plan heavily and storyboard and get a detailed shot list of Miles. We then sorted locations and risk assessments out. For this film, I really wanted to dive into some research in pre-production of how to use the Blackmagic Pocket cinema camera to prepare for the film. Many YouTube tutorials really helped me out on this one, as I felt seeing the actual hands-on experience was preferred to me reading a book. In production, we had our location sorted and we chose to film on the 12th of November. For this film, we really wanted to get the bleakness and the darkness of the location out in the camera. All 3 of us were very collaborative on set. Miles would have storyboards that we would constantly refer back to as a guide However, we would have to adjust ourselves and adapt on set. For example, due to the story that the opposite person to Miles's character is in fact Miles, we had to make sure that the camera was never directly on the other man's face. As well as adding mystery to the story, it also added a sense of unease, never giving away the true identity of this person, referring to how lonely someone can get and hiding away from the public view. In post-production, we really wanted to concentrate on the colour grading of the film. We wanted to set the tone, have a low-key light to project Miles's character's emotion. We experimented with many different types of light, however we found the blue that really suited the story. I feel we could have been more prepared, although we did have a lack of time. It's always going to be a hard deadline for these films. I do feel I should have done better with some of the camera work that I did. Some parts were really overexposed and some were really shaky. I felt throughout a large majority of the film that the lighting wasn't too awful and the colour grading was pretty good. I feel the mise en scène wasn't too bad as well. The location was really good for how we wanted to film and the costume really suited this particular character that we wanted. I feel we would have scripted this particular idea from the start. Our first idea was one that all of us had a big passion for, however it just ended up being too hard to pull off in the time that we had. My third production was called Broken. The film skill was sound, had to be a maximum of 2 minutes, no dialogue, and music was completely up to you. The film opens up with an actor getting ready to perform. As we see him in his makeup chair, the film begins to cut between him and the chair to him cleaning up an old stage floor. While he's cleaning, it takes him back to when he was an actor, when he had an accident while shaving, causing his face to scar, in turn then killing his career. Going into pre-production, I chose to do some research on an AC and how they would operate on set, as that was going to be my role on this production. The areas such as focus pulling or being a clapper loader really interest me, so this is something that I really was excited to do. We started production on the 22nd of November, where we filmed at the studios at Ravensbourne to use as the main scene. We then also filmed on the 27th of November at the YouTube space in King's Cross. On the stage floor, where the character is seen cleaning at the start, we wanted to be distanced from him so you couldn't quite suss the character out. This is very important as it is a heavy contrast from the chair, as it is very up close and personal in those scenes. Having that distance also makes you feel a bigger sense of impact at the end when it reveals the scar that's been left behind. As well as having the large space, it makes the character feel small, vulnerable and left behind, which is another relation to his career. Moving into post-production, due to such little time we only had pretty much a day to edit the entire film. However, we still worked hard at it and wanted to make the story flow and make sense for the audience, especially with the use of jump cuts during the actor's memory. Also working on the colour grading from a lighter orange to a darker blue to get that contrast between the character's emotion at that particular time. I feel I could have got better sound for the film overall. It is a hard area, although I should have done some more research into it. I felt like I worked well with the crew and embraced the story. I also think we were very professional in how we acted, and the location really worked well for the story. It was a really hard film to pull off in the first place, but we gave it a go. My fourth and final film was called Inverted. The film skill was post-language, it had to be 1 minute maximum, characters, music and dialogue were completely up to you. It was due in on the 6th of December. The roles here are as follows. The synopsis of the film is centred around an adult man who is given a meal in front of him. Acting like a toddler, picking and playing with his food, he finally attempts to open his mouth and try and eat it. He gives up by slamming his fork down and pushing the dinner away from him. It then reveals a young boy sitting at the other end of the table reading a newspaper, shaking his head in disgust. Pre-production for me was a bit different. As I was the director and writer of this one, I started on a script straight away. So I knew I was going to need 2 actors. I managed to get Tim Nixon to play the older man and Max Taylor to play the little boy. I had my eye on 2 locations and eventually went for one in Croxley Green. With storyboarding, location, cast, script and equipment complete, I then chose to do a bit of research on how to direct an actor. 2 books that are really helpful was Digital Filmmaking Revised and Cinematography Theory and Practice. Production started on 3rd of December so we could then edit the film for the rest of the week. I wanted the film to be very close to Tim's character, to emphasise his facial expressions. It was important that the audience didn't feel distant from Tim and felt his pain. Having the cinematography very straight and centred and sturdy was very important as well. Director Wes Anderson really inspired me for the way he shoots. However, I didn't want everything to be symmetrical as I wanted to create a sense that Tim was trapped. Post-production was really where the story was going to come to life. Quick cuts as well as cross-cutting was something that I knew I wanted from the very start in the film. All sound in the film was Foley. I wanted there to be a very natural colour to the film. I wanted to relate more to the viewer and remind them of being at a young age. The sound wasn't perfect due to the lack of equipment I managed to book out. Some of the shots in the edit were a little overexposed, however it was really hard to control this on set due to where we were filming. I feel we edited the film effectively to squeeze in the entire film into pretty much a minute exact, as well as getting a really good location that would immerse the story into being believable. The acting was really solid as well. If we could do it again, I'll definitely get my hands on some decent sound gear.